Cruise Control streams live every Saturday starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. Watch us live on Facebook and YouTube. Details are in this podcast's episode information.
This is Cruise Control. Your on-air automotive magazine with co-hosts Fred Staub and Les Jackson. Everything you need to know about new and used cars. Industry news. We'll fix or repair your car on the air. Fasten your seatbelts and let us take the wheel. Now, your ride is about to begin. Because you're on Cruise Control. Cruise Control. Cruise Control.
Yes, indeed. Welcome, everybody, to Cruise Control, your on-air automotive magazine. I, as usual, am Les Jackson. Well, I guess I always am. And over there at the other chair is Fred Staub.
Hey, Les.
And we are cozy in the command center. It's nice and warm.
That's right.
We have the coffee brewing somewhere.
Is that like it's 5 o'clock somewhere? No,
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah,
and we've got just a huge amount of very different and very informative stories. So let's get going.
Yeah, well, Les, we're going to start this hour with change at the top. This story goes way back. Since 1931, General Motors has been the lead manufacturer of vehicles in the U.S., the best-selling manufacturer of vehicles in the U.S. Now there's a change at the top. Toyota takes the flag.
Toyota, after 90 years of GM dominance, is now the number one auto company.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, good for them. You know, great company. And another great company, VW, say they still need the Jetta in the U.S. I agree. I think it's a really great car. And they announced the reveal date for, we've talked about this, the Volkswagen Buzz van.
Yeah, that's, I've got a lot of friends that are ready to put down some dollars on its short little hood to buy that. They're excited about that. Then we're going to talk tech, Les. You know, when we first talked about this story a couple of months ago, we were like, what can it be? You know, but it's true. BMW has a car that will change color at the push of a button. We have footage to prove it.
I saw the footage. I still don't believe it, but it's there. And speaking of don't believe it, if you get a car loan, and who doesn't, boy, there's an awful lot you need to know. There are just so many ways you can get cheated. And Consumer Reports investigative journalist Ryan Felton is going to join us a little later. They've done an extensive research on this, and he's got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, it sure does. We're going to have some tips for you. If you are buying a vehicle or thinking about financing a vehicle, these are things to watch out for. Ryan will be by. Tell us all about that Consumer Reports investigation. I think it's a good one. All that and more when we get rolling on this edition of Cruise Control Radio. And a little later on, Les, we're going to talk about the Silverado EV, which was a big reveal at the CES show out in Las Vegas. They didn't know whether that would be able to be pulled off by the COVID situation, but it was, and we will tell you about it. We have a great interview and more coming up on Cruise Control, your on-air automotive magazine. Check us out at cruisecontrolradio.com. We'll be right back. Cruise Control is your on-air automotive magazine. Check us out at cruisecontrolradio.com.
Cruise Control.
And welcome back to Cruise Control, your on-air automotive magazine. We hope you are ready for some great automotive information because we've got plenty of it, Les. And we're starting off with a story about Toyota becoming the top automotive manufacturer in the U.S. GM has held that title since 1931. I don't know who held it before that. Probably Ford, I would imagine.
Probably
right?
Ford, sure, with Model T, Model A.
Yeah. But this year, or for the sales numbers of 2021, Toyota has announced it sold 2.332 million vehicles last year, and that bests GM's 2.218 million vehicles in 2021. And that was a 13% decrease on GM from the prior year. I kind of think this boils down to chips. Basically, Toyota found a way to stockpile the chips, or was in a much better position when this came along to have these chips to build the vehicles. I mean, if you can't build the vehicles, remember, we had many manufacturers building vehicles and partially building them, just setting them aside, right?
That's right. And, you know, when they're set aside, you're not selling them, you're not booking the money.
Mm-hmm.
Toyota just, you know, they planned ahead better.
And then didn't GM have a strike during this year? Last year? I think it was last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
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 And of course, shutdowns for COVID and that, but Toyota had some of that as well. The thing is, what will happen when chips come out and we start getting more chips? Will Toyota be able to hang on to this? They certainly have a powerful lineup of vehicles. They have a fresh lineup of vehicles. But then again, GM is coming out with a lot of exciting vehicles. One you and I talked about this week, the Silverado EV. They're kind of transitioning to electric vehicles. What do you think? It will be kind of a seesaw battle, I think.
I think so. But, you know, maybe it won't be so quick. I think Toyota's going to hold on to this for, I'm thinking, a year or two, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, you know, let's remember too, some of those vehicles that GM is bringing out that are electric are going to be very expensive as well. And Toyota has some great vehicles that are in the $30,000-$40,000 range, which is soon to be inexpensive vehicles, believe it or not. I think overall the price of vehicles is going to go up. But it really, I think this number boils down to chips. If you can't finish the vehicles, if you can't finish building the vehicles, you can't sell them. It's as simple as that.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Now, one manufacturer that has kind of done a good job during the chip crisis and during COVID and all of that is Volkswagen. They, too, have a lot of new product coming out. Of course, they released the ID.4 electric crossover. They have the Buzz coming out, which we're going to tell you a little bit about when that is going to be coming out. Their electric van, bringing back the VW Bus. But Car Buzz was speaking to VW North American President Scott Kellogg, and he talked about why the Jetta is still needed in the lineup in the U.S. Now, you would say, oh, well, they just want to get rid of all sedans, and, you know, that's it. We'll do all crossovers. And a matter of fact, they have gotten rid of the Passat. That is, whatever's around is around. That's it. They're not going to build the Passat anymore or sell it in the U.S. But Scott says that the Jetta remains in the U.S. lineup because it is affordable. It's a good quality product, and it starts at a $20,000 MSRP, which is attractive to many people. You can even get the Jetta GLI, which is a fun vehicle to drive, for $31,000, which, believe it or not, is a deal these days, isn't it, Les Jackson?
It seems to be a really good deal these days, which is sort of depressing.
Yeah.
And the Jetta, you know, the Jetta is a good size car. It's not a compact. I like it.
Yeah. And it has a lot of safety features. You have a lot of different trim level options. It's got great trunk room. And it's got a lot of the technology on the inside. So I think it is something that people really, when they go looking at prices, I think a lot of people might say, wow, I can't get a crossover, but maybe I can get this Jetta and go from there. Hey, when we come back, we're going to tell you about another VW vehicle that it will go for more than $20,000. I'm sure that's the VW Buzz. It is their next take on the VW Bus. So stay tuned to Cruise Control. We'll be right back. I'm Fred Staub. He's Les Jackson. Stay tuned.
And welcome back to Cruise Control. We are your on-air automotive magazine. I'm Les, he's Fred, and we promised before the break that we would talk about the upcoming VW Buzz. This is the
ID Buzz,
the 21st century version of the iconic Volkswagen Bus.
Yeah.
It's going to be electric. And it's really cool looking. The renderings we've seen.
Yeah. Now it
you
was
just want to drive it.
It was revealed, I'll call it, the concept back in 2017. So there's a long waiting time for it. Its official debut date, March 9th of 2022.
Beautiful. This is going to be a big deal.
I think so. I think a lot of people I know are interested in this thing. There's going to be a what we used to call a panel van, which will have enclosed sides for using it as a delivery truck or whatever. There's going to be a camper. They've announced the California version, which is what sells in Europe as the camper with the bed that flips up. We don't know if that's coming to the U.S. I think they'd be foolish not to bring it to the U.S. But it's going to be exciting. And do you think they will bring out a version with all those windows? What is it? The 22 windows?
I don't see how they can avoid it. It is just so sought after. And as you know, if you have one of those 23 window vans, even in basket case condition, they're worth about 30 grand.
I know. We have a friend at one of the manufacturers that has one, and James Bell from Kia, and he always features it in his videos when he comes on and discusses new Kia models. And we always ask him, is that a new Kia model behind you? Is that something you want to share with us? But a little bit of information. It's going to have batteries ranging from 40 kilowatt hours to 111 kilowatt hours, a 201 horsepower single motor rear drive setup, and then there will also be dual motor and all-wheel drive versions. So we're going to see a lot of options here, certainly many more options than the VW Bus had originally. So we'll have to wait till March, but it's coming. It's interesting. Herbert Diess announced this, the VW Group chairman, and he says the legend returns on 03/09/22. And he says, to be clear, this is not September 9th for any overseas readers. In America, the month is listed first, not second. Where will this be built? Will it be built in the U.S.? I believe so. I believe it is built in the U.S.
I think it is, yeah.
So we will probably see this built in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So also,
boy, well, there'll be a lot of orders for that.
I think there will. You think anyone will like customize it like vans of the past with flowers and stuff? Oh
yeah, of course. Paisleys and flowers and
all that and more.
You gotta.
Well, let's talk a little tech, shall we, Les? This was revealed at the show and CES show in Las Vegas, and you might say, "Oh, well, that's neat. Some kind of post-production trick on those on that video to make the car appear to change color." Nope, it actually does change color on its own. BMW had talked about this, and now it is real. It uses electrophoretic technology, and this is actually a wrap that is on the car. So you could theoretically add this to any car when it becomes available. But it is quite amazing to see this thing change. Now, we have footage from BMW, but I also saw some footage on the web of them backing the car around in a parking lot, just regular video, and it was even more dramatic. I think they should have just had it outside and just showed it change color. Many uses for this, of course, inside and outside capability for this wrap. They call it e-ink technology. And you think about how this could be used. There's actual ways of using this where you could, let's say, it's a sunny day and you could make the hood black so it didn't reflect into your eyes. Or it's a hot day and your black car is getting too hot, so you could change the roof to white. Think about that, Les Jackson.
Well, that's pretty cool. The other thing, of course, is that you could rob a bank and change the color as you get around the corner. And everybody's looking for a white car.
Well, the other thing I thought of is a lot of friends that drive race cars have always said, well, I want to change sponsors for different races. Somebody only wants to sponsor me for one race, and then now I have to get the car rewrapped. I got to get it repainted. And that takes a lot of time and money. Well, what about this? Eventually, they'll be able to project video on this, I would imagine. And and you can say, well, you get let's say if it's a drag race, you can be my sponsor for the qualifying session on Saturday. And then if you want to pay more, you would pay for that, on the Sunday race. Think of this, trucks, advertising. You know those big trucks they drive around with the big heavy screens on it?
Yep.
You don't need that anymore. You could put this on every box truck. The other use of it, I think, and I thought this was supposed to happen sooner than later, on big high trucks, they're supposed to have a screen on the back so you can see what's in front of the truck for light stop lights and things like that.
Right.
This would be easy to do. It's like a decal.
You could display it.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like a decal. So I think.
Now, do we know if right now it's just the black and white, or are there other colors?
As far as we know, it is just the black and white and sort of a geometric texture pattern. So I think this is just the beginning of this. It can be controlled with a controller inside, and there are millions of what they call paint capsules in the custom wrap. Electrophonetic coloring is based on a technology by e-ink, and that's well known for displays used in things like e-readers. So I think white or black pigments right now. That's what it is, white or black pigments. You can sure, though, this is going to expand and get bigger.
Oh, yeah.
And we're just seeing the beginning here. I think virtually every vehicle, you could have racing stripes on this thing. You could have all kinds of things that could change. And I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of. It's just beginning.
You could probably write on it. You'll be able to type in, you're following too close.
potential for people to get in trouble, but there you have it. That's our talking tech
cool.
for this week. Pretty cool. It actually was a lot better than I thought it would be when we first described this. We heard about that this was coming up. I thought, yeah,
and we have to see this in person. I suspect it's even more dramatic.
Well, as I said, I saw footage of it just in a parking lot. Someone was backing the car up, and when it changed colors, everyone standing around went, "Whoa, what just happened?" They're like, it almost looked unnatural. It almost looked unnatural. So, hey, when we come back, we have a great guest coming up, Ryan Felton, who is an investigative journalist. He's going to tell us about a piece he did for Consumer Reports, a car loan investigation. There's a lot of hijinks going on out there when you come to finance a car or truck, and we think you should know about it, especially if you're going to be going out and financing a new vehicle. Ryan's got some great findings from this, study from for Consumer Reports. So he's going to join us after the break. Stay tuned to Cruise Control. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and all that and more. Stay tuned. We are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Watch us on Facebook and YouTube. Details are in this podcast's episode information.
Cruise Control.
And welcome back to Cruise Control, your on-air automotive magazine. I'm Fred Staub. He is Les Jackson. And if you are a longtime listener or viewer to this show, you know we like to give you tips when it comes to buying a vehicle, what vehicle to buy, everything about the buying process. And that's what we're going to do today, because Consumer Reports did a investigation about some things going on, let's say, with car loans, Les, that are a little bit concerning, or a lot concerning. And Ryan Felton, who works for Consumer Reports as an investigative journalist, has been on this. We want to welcome Ryan to Cruise Control. Ryan, welcome. How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, let's talk about this Consumer Reports car loan investigation. How did it all get started? I mean, you're an investigative journalist, and obviously something came across your desk, and you were like, "Wow, this is big news."
Yeah, I had been covering auto lending for some time at my last job, and it's issues related to personal finance decisions, especially when it comes to what can be one of the biggest assets for some folks. Talking about their car, it's a big deal, and given that it's such a big deal, it's just a very obvious and easy story for someone like me who has an interest in it to gravitate toward, especially at a time when auto lending is through the roof. I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the numbers. The most recent is I think I saw used car payments are now averaging above $520 or something like that. I mean, it's
wow.
So yeah, I mean, when you generally have an interest in these things, it's just such a compelling story to understand, just because it's burden is a relative term given to certain aspects of a particular person's life, but I think it's fair to say a car can be an enormous burden financially for a lot of folks, be it buying a used car or trying to take on a new car payment for whatever reason. It's an important asset, and it's a costly one, and so there's always a lot to unpack, I think, and it's always going to be an ever evolving story. So that's another reason why I find it interesting.
Let's start out by just telling everyone how big the auto loan industry is and how much money is owed to these banks and whatever the financial. It's staggering.
Yeah. So about around the time of the Great Recession, it was, somewhere around 700 billion, 800 billion, and that of total auto loan debt outstanding. So just, the amount of money that Americans owed. And since that time, that number, has grown to now. I haven't checked the most recent figures, but the ones that we cited in the report that were most recent at the time, it was north of 1.4 trillion.
Wow.
Which
so
is,
double.
and that's,
Double.
it's equivalent to the gross domestic product of Australia. So, we're holding on to a lot of auto loan debt. And, there's many major banks and lenders and finance entities involved, but there's a lot of, when you take into account used car dealers that do their own financing, I mean, there's a lot of companies that are in this field as well. It's a very big industry.
And let's think about this. Let's put ourselves in the seat of someone buying a vehicle. They're more excited about the vehicle. Maybe they don't do the research on the financing. you go into the dealer, you're excited. Wow, look at all this. You get your free cup of coffee.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's all a game. And then, wow, here comes all the financing stuff. Now, you've got some takeaways here from your study, and let's talk about them. Number one, similar consumers got very different loans, which you would think they'd just be looking at people. It's like, hey, here's what you make, here's what you can afford, but that's not the case, right?
Yeah, and the limitation is that we had to work with the data that we had. So, we had a lot of important, what I understand and most people in the industry would understand and believe important variables. We had the credit score, the amount of money that they were estimated to earn each month. How much equity was in the car at the time it was originated, in the loan at the time it was originated. The make, model, year, lots of really informative things, but there are a couple of things that aren't included. The borrower's gender, their race, exactly where they live beyond, at a more narrow scope than the state. So, I think that's one of the caveats is there are some limitations whenever you're looking at something. But that said, given that we did have all these important variables, I think there was enough, we had enough that, is confident enough for us to say that, there's some striking examples of folks who would appear, I think, to the normal average person to be very similar, but wound up having completely different terms. For example, one of the cases that we cited, there was two California residents who went out to buy a 2017 Chevy Trax. They both were in the same credit score range. They both earned about the same amount of money. Both had about the same amount of equity in the car. And yet one got an APR of, I believe, somewhere between 4 and 5%, and the other got an APR of around 14%. And that came from the same lender.
Wow.
So, it's obviously you're going to see variability against different types of lenders, but, when we started seeing that sort of broad scope among the same lenders, it does raise a lot of questions as to, what could be driving that.
Now, one of the things that people aren't aware of is that when you go to buy a car, the F&I manager, finance and insurance manager at the dealership, is the person that you're given off to by the salespeople.
Yeah.
And that person is heavily commissioned on how much money they make on the loan.
Right. And
the dealership gets basically a commission from the bank, right, for the financial institution. So there are, this example you had of the person getting the 14% loan, there's some predatory practices going on to stick people with higher rates. And it's legal.
Yeah,
it brings us, I think, but
to number two, that you found dealers and lenders may charge what they think they can get away with. So someone's sitting across from you and they say, hey, she's nicely dressed, he's nicely dressed, seems like they might be able to afford more cars, so maybe they can afford more interest. Is that?
Yeah. So, what to Les's point, I mean, I think there's a couple words for it, but the general term is dealer markup, which is the fee that they get, the dealer gets for basically arranging the loan for a customer. There was a lot of litigation and regulatory action in the 2000s and 2010s to kind of go to address dealer markup. And so if you ask a lot of the lenders and industry groups, they would say this is capped at, an extra 1 to 2% on the APR. And it's not as significant as people might believe. But, those are figures too, it's hard to verify that because that's not publicly available information, to your point.
Right.
So, one thing when we're looking at this is to, what's a big thing that sticks out. And the F&I manager, the loan that gets selected. I mean, one of the big things that consumer advocates have long raised concerns about is the dealer may work with multiple lenders,
Right.
and they may get multiple offers for the same individual, but they don't have to show you
Right.
all of the offers.
Yeah.
Right.
So that gives a particular dealer the opportunity to look at what loan they think they could make the most money on.
Right.
For example, there's a company called Credit Acceptance Corporation. They typically work with lower credit scored consumers. When they patented their pricing system, in the patent, they actually say this will allow dealers to pick the most profitable loan for them.
Wow.
So that's one lender. That's not to say every lender functions that way, but that the reality of the system, the way it's designed, is that they don't have to show you every single loan. And so when they tell you this is the best that we can get, you have to take their word for it.
It's the best you'll get. That's the best we're going to give you.
Yeah, that's the best. Yeah, we're going to give you.
Yeah. Hey, when we come back, we're going to stay with Ryan and talk a little bit more about his Consumer Reports investigation, about what's going on with loans. Great information if you're going to buy a vehicle anytime soon. I'm Fred Staub. He is Les Jackson. Ryan's going to stick with us, so stay tuned to Cruise Control. We're going to have some tips for buying, what you can do to control this situation, too. Cruise Control is your on-air automotive magazine. Check us out at cruisecontrolradio.com.
Cruise Control.
Welcome back to Cruise Control. We've got Ryan Felton, who is an investigative journalist for Consumer Reports. We're talking about some of the findings he came up with when doing his piece for Consumer Reports about loans, auto loans. And Ryan, you just said something right before we came back in. You did a piece and you found out that somebody has gotten the highest APR that I've ever heard in my life for a loan. We, as part of the story, the reporting, I mean, one thing that we wanted to home in on was, what the landscape was for laws governing interest rates. There's no federal interest rate limit for auto loans, so it's left to the states. So we went out to all 50 states and asked the relevant regulators to, provide us insight as to what their relevant laws were. And, in some cases there's decent limits, like stricter limits. I would say stricter instead of decent. For example, as low as 15 to 17% in some areas. Mm-hmm.
In some places, though, there's no limit at all. And even in places where there are limits, for example, we interviewed someone in Nevada, which has a 40% APR limit. But on the loan that they got, it actually carried a 75% APR, which I'd never heard of something like that.
Was this
a car.
Was this from a legal source of lending
Yeah,
here?
it was a legitimate dealer that had their own financing operation in house, and it was written plainly into the contract.
Wow.
And I know there's some folks who may say, well, it's on the borrower, to make their own appropriate decision as well. But, in some cases, especially when you're talking about consumers who are relegated to these types of dealers, they need a car. They don't have the time or the resources to seek out the best deal.
Right.
So, that is definitely, and the fellow I talked to, I mean, he says much. He's like, he knew it was a lot, but some people, they just need a car.
Wow.
And so that's where I think some issues can exist when you have such a significant proportion of the country that doesn't really have much in the way of limiting some of these higher rates that we've seen reporting all of this.
Well,
Boy, it would almost be cheaper to rent a car than it would
I think
to
so.
buy, or go to a loan shark.
That sounds like a loan shark at
do better.
75%. I mean, it plays into a couple of more of your findings. Many people were given loans they can't afford, Ryan, and then there was no income verification. What's the point of doing that? Because you're just going to have to go and get the car because they're not going to be able to pay for it.
Yeah, in some case, I mean, in terms of what's the point of not doing that? I mean, I think the reality, the biggest distinction between your car and your house is it's pretty easy to go fetch a car if you need it to be repoed, and so I think that there's less of a concern on the part of the business of whether they'd be able to recoup when you're talking about some of these larger lenders that we were looking at, because they're able to go find a car if someone's not paying it. There's plenty of there's a repossession industry that exists for that very reason.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think we were definitely surprised to see that income and employment verification was so low. I think the main comment that I heard from those who responded to that, companies and groups that responded to that, was, well, we have all these proprietary systems that are able to really look at one's credit applications. So, we have all these other ways of checking to make sure. But, at the end of the day, there's enough. We found plenty of examples in the story where the lack of income verification on the back end could really impact some consumers. Like one woman, single mother from Oklahoma, needed a car. I can't remember if she was on disability or Social Security. I think it was disability, but got about $800 a month.
Oh,
in income, and took on a car that ended up having like a $300 payment or $300 payment. I can't remember exactly, but the point is, the dealer reported on their credit application without them knowing, according to the lawsuit that she filed, that she made $5,500 a month.
Oh God!
So
it's just fraud.
Right. So if you're doing that verification on the back end, then maybe you catch that, and then the woman doesn't have to go through on the process of falling behind and losing her car, and the detrimental impacts that happen as a result of that. So
yeah, wow. Well,
so
go ahead, Les. I think we should get to some tips too.
I think we can draw at least one conclusion here, and that is, if someone is commissioned for what they do, for what they sell, for what they provide, the likelihood of them making decisions that are in their favor of making the most money is extremely high. So we want to, for instance, the wealth management, finance advisors, you'll find that all across the board they sell annuities because that they make the greatest commission doing that. They're not fiduciary, but what do we do? What do we tell people to how to avoid getting screwed? Frankly,
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the biggest things is if you can obtain financing from a local bank or credit union before going to the dealer. Mm-hmm. So then you show up and you say, this is what I'm approved for. This is what I can spend. I'm not going above that. So then that immediately will push out, not immediately, but, because there's obviously many ways I think that tactics that can be used. But the whole point of doing that is then you're preventing the possibility of needless add-ons being packed into a loan, for example. They don't have the incentive to do that because you already have the loan. So that's number one. And I think the biggest thing is, if you need to go through a dealer or you want to go through a dealer because of the convenience of it, to not just focus on negotiating the monthly payment. I think, most people don't realize or don't remember, but they don't negotiate the terms. And you can. There's nothing stopping you. There's nothing, telling. No one's telling you can't. That I think is something that could benefit a lot of people. There was a study done that I thought was just so interesting about how counterintuitive people act in the process and car buying process. And the findings were that people essentially act as if they would, it sounds confusing when you say it, but they would take $1 off the price of the car, and in exchange, they would pay 86 cents more overall. So they're feeling good about getting the dollar off,
right.
but they're actually in effect paying more because they're not focused on it.
Right.
And that's huge.
And there are games that goes on that you're, like I say, you're at the dealer, you're excited. Oh, look at this brand new car, all this stuff and all this other things you can add to it. And, it's only $20 more a month to add the floor mats in or whatever. You end up spending way over what you have to spend to buy whatever you're looking at. And it has to be almost a totally emotionless, like I always say, you should go in and there's a red Corvette and you really wanted red. And the guy's like, well, we got one here. Yeah, you should say, I really wanted a black Corvette, but I guess I consider red. You never seem happy, never seem pumped up, just like, okay, yeah, I guess, it's all about doing homework too. And I think that's what we're about here on Cruise Control. You got to come in and know what you're buying, what it should cost. And Ryan, you did that with financing. You've raised some great points. We're going to put your whole report up, your consumer report up on our website. So Ryan Felton, we appreciate you being on Cruise Control. Time for me to say I'm Fred Staub.
I'm Les Jackson.
We're going to see you down the road.
Bye.
Cruise Control streams live every Saturday starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. Watch us live on Facebook and YouTube. Details are in this podcast's episode information.